living in Atlanta, but being from Pasadena. Greg Wade. Greg, where'd you go to school? You go to Blair?
Blair High.
Yeah. So Greg Wade went to Blair. You went where, Isaiah?
Get them dogs. HS. Pasadena
High.
High.
So you just told us basically about being from California, being going to school in Pasadena.
Perfect. Now I moved to Metro Atlanta in 2005. So I've been out here for a while now, about 15 years. And for the last 3 of those 15 years, I've been pastoring the Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church in Cartersville, Georgia. On August the 1st of this year, as Pastor mentioned, my very first book came out entitled Black Church Empowered. I feel uniquely called to do whatever I can by God's grace to help the Black church flourish into the 21st century and beyond. And I feel that my work for the Black church is also helping the universal body of Christ to flourish as well, because the Black church is a segment of the universal body of Christ. Now, because I am involved in the Black church, I pastor a Black church, and I'm primarily people intentionally have entered myself into the racial reconciliation conversation, intentionally chosen to engage and concerned the white brothers and sisters in Christ have entered into this space as yes. Hello?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up just a little bit. Repeat what you said.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I've entered into this space as not somebody that is a learner, but also somebody that has unique insight, unique perspective, and somebody that's done some pretty extensive research on American evangelicalism's relation to racism, white supremacy, slavery, Jim Crow, and other systems of oppression. So while I engage in these conversations as one who is still learning, I also bring to the table scholarship in this particular area that I think lends well in helping those within the majority culture to think through these issues and to consider aspects that they may not regularly or easily consider. And so I am often invited to speak for different organizations. There's an organization here in Remerge that's a racial conciliation organization. There's another organization entitled Be the Bridge, and I'm frequently called upon to offer insight from the Black church perspective into this conversation. And so I'm happy to share any wisdom that I may have, and I'm also happy to glean wisdom from everyone on the line as well. So that's a little bit of my story. I do touch on this subject in my book. Although the book is entitled Black Church Empowered, there are nuggets in the book for my white brothers and sisters to consider, for them to grapple with why the Black church exists in the first place, and for them to really kind of come to an understanding of how American evangelicalism has contributed in a lot of ways to the oppression and marginalization of people of color. So I'll stop right there, Pastor, and turn it over.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. So I want to start with considering our young people that are with us. Again, my objective is for them to get insight and to stoke some questions that might come to them. So
Pastor, I'm having a hard time hearing you. There's something else in the background. There's some feedback, I think, in the background that's making it difficult for me to hear you.
I got it. Took care of it. Better?
That's better.
Okay. So for the sake of our young people on the line, I'm interested to have a conversation or have you speak to why do you believe or why do you feel that this issue of race and the church is such an issue within the church community? Why in the church? Both of these young people have attended Black churches, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't know about you, Ariana, but I know that Ayana and Jeremiah have at times attended predominantly white churches. Why this issue today as relates to the church community and race? What's your perspective on that? And that's part A of this question. Part B is, and do you believe that as African American youth that they are underserved or disserved by attending a predominantly white church, and that they would be better served attending a Black church, and why? Those are two questions I'd like you to talk about.
Yep. Well, this conversation is crucial, in the church, particularly because Jesus prays a prayer in John 17. And the prayer that he prays is that we may be one, we talking about those who would receive him through the gospel and the ministry of the disciples, right? That we may be one, even as he is one with the Father. So Jesus wants a church on earth that is united, okay? But if we don't talk about America's sordid past, if we don't converse about racial injustice, if we pretend to be colorblind, then ultimately we are setting up a false unity, a superficial unity that is really based upon fantasy and not reality, right? God is not a colorblind God. I mean, look around, right? Look at creation, right? You've got different colors of trees, you got different colors of animals, and all of creation glorifies God in the way that it was created, in existing in the way that it was created. And it's the same with human beings, with people, all right? We are red and yellow, black and white, and we glorify God not when we try to have some type of, false colorblind society, but we glorify God when we recognize our distinctions, when we recognize our differences, and rather than run away from them, we lean into them and glorify God through them. It is ridiculous because God is not colorblind, neither should we be. So if we're going to have true unity, we have to talk about race. We have to understand particularly the perspective of those on the margins, because the perspective of those on the margins, the perspective of oppressed groups is often it often goes unheard. The majority culture is used to having their perspectives conversed about, presented almost as standard, right? Almost as normal, right? So many of the perspectives of the majority culture are normalized. However, for those of us on the margins, for those of us who are not a part of the majority culture, our perspectives are often suppressed and ignored. And so in order for us to have true unity, there needs to be space for courageous discussion and dialogue. And so, yes, it is crucially important if we're really going to reach true unity, number one. Number two, yes, if there is a church that is organized around false unity, right? If there is a church that explicitly or implicitly, if they do not recognize the image of God in brown bodies and black bodies, and what I mean by that is, what is their stance and their position when an unarmed black man is brutally murdered by police officers? Do they rush to exonerate the police officers? Do they rush to criminalize the black person or the brown person by bringing up their rap sheet? If they're doing that, then they are implicitly denying the image of God within that person. Because I don't care who you are. I don't care if you have a rap sheet. I don't care if you're addicted to meth. I don't care if you just got done robbing 16 houses, right? You do not deserve, because you are created in the image of God, you do not deserve to be gunned down in the streets like a dog, particularly if you are unarmed, and particularly if you are running away from police officers. So when there is a rush to exonerate the officers and blame the victim, it is implicitly expressing a lack of understanding around the image of God in black bodies. So yes, if that is the case, if a black person, a brown person is in any space where they are made to assimilate, where their culture is frowned upon, minimized, where they are made to believe that it is oxymoronic or somehow wrong to embrace being black and Christian, right? If there's somehow this faulty notion that you have to make your blackness subservient to your Christianity, and you can't courageously affirm a black and Christian, then yes, they need to leave. I've said a lot, but let me end by saying this. W.B. Du Bois, in his classic work, The Souls of Black Folks, a term that he coined called double consciousness. All right, it's this reality that black people in America, in order to exist, in order to survive and even thrive in this country, we've had to develop two consciousness, two minds, one white and one black. We've had to think like white people in order to successfully, make it through an interview and achieve a position that we're going after. We've had to understand white American culture and even in some sense assimilate in order to reach some semblance of success in this country, while simultaneously maintaining a black consciousness. So we can't detach from our own cultural heritage and group, right? So we've had to exist in this country with a double consciousness, and it is exhausting. It is tiring. And the black church is the one space that black people can go to and just exhale and not have to worry about the white gaze and not have to worry about assimilating into some type of standardized and normalized way of thinking, way of singing, way of being. The black church is one space where black people can go. Now, with all its flaws, because the black church is not perfect, however, the black church is the one rare space that black people can go to and just be. And so, yes, if they are attending a church that refuses to recognize the image of God in them, and then actively acts as if, and even professes that Black Lives Matter, right? And again, if anybody has an issue with that terminology, then I think that they have an issue with, again, the doctrine of the Imago Dei. So if they are afraid to profess that and act in a way that substantiates that term, then yes, that
I just want to
detrimental and potential.
I just want to define. You use the Latin term Imago Dei, which for our young people you may not have heard that term before, but essentially is a Latin way of the image of God, and the doctrine of the image of God is, and this is for the sake of Ayana, Jeremiah, Samara, and Ariana, that we all people have been created in the image of God. We're all image bearers. Therefore, we all should be respected and honored as such. And so, yes, so Pastor Isaiah, you said a lot, but one of the things, and I want to get Samara and Ari and the Gibsons in on this dialogue. You said something that I think is important for us to explore, and that is the importance of hearing, respecting, and valuing those who are marginalized, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
in our culture today, and particularly in the church, Dr. King or someone, Malcolm X maybe, said that Sunday, 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour of the week, right? We know that to be true. We know that to be true. We live in suburbia, but we definitely know that to be true in urban settings. A little bit less
Mm-hmm.
in suburbia, but absolutely in urban settings. So I'm curious from Samara and our young people. First of all, do you all see yourself as marginalized as you deal with your white friends that you go to school with, that you do sports with, that you dance with, that you whatever? And for sake of just clarity, to be marginalized is to be placed on the fringe as unimportant or devalued or uh, not as significant as the larger population. So that's a question to our young people. Do you, and I know all of you live out here, you live in either Menifee or Riverside or Marietta, um, or Lake Elsinore, do you see yourself as marginalized as an African American young person in the high school, on the sports field, in these other arenas? Can you please talk to us?
Um, I I did feel that way when I was younger. I guess when I started playing sports, mainly track, was when I was surrounded more by people who looked like me. And I guess like after starting track and kind of basically growing up in that sport, and those were the people who I was mainly around, I never really thought of um, me being less important than my white friends. Um, I do think, however, I was like if I was in a friend, like if I was with a group of friends, sometimes I did feel as if I was kind of just overlooked. It's just like, oh, we have this one Black friend and she hangs out with us, but like, you know, um, it was like if they weren't, if my white friends, if they weren't together, like if one person wasn't at school, then it was like they would come to me. So it's kind of like I was the second choice. And I think that was mainly the only time where I felt less important and kind of an outcast.
What about in the church arena, Samara? I know you guys, obviously we're all social distancing right now and not actually attending a worship service, and I know that you and your mom have chosen to attend worship online with what's the name of the church?
Transformation Church.
Yeah, Transformation Church. And so, talk to me about, and Ari, the Gibsons, and Ari, I want you all to talk about this as well. But just, can you help us understand how you feel attending a white church? I know you went to the Rock for a little while, and you've gone to Calvary. When you talk about being Black and in that environment.
It was interesting because, for most of my childhood, we went to Mountain View, and mainly we were surrounded by, it was a Black church. It was mainly Black church. So, I mean, I think because it was a predominantly of, I mean, it was pretty diverse, but there were still more white people than Black and Hispanics and any other person of color. I didn't, I think because I was scared, I didn't really got connected with other like kids or joined any groups or anything. I kind of was just like, it was a little bit out of my comfort zone. So I kind of just stayed with my mom. Um, but the it was a different environment because like the worship, the way the pastor preached. It was different. It was really like it wasn't what I was used to. So kind of just being there in that environment, I was like, it was kind of hard to explain. It was just
Okay.
a
Okay.
little. Eh.
But did you feel invited? Did you feel like they were reaching out for you to be included? Was there an inclusive environment?
Um, sometimes I felt that way, and sometimes I was kind of just like they didn't really care. They like didn't really say, "Oh, you should come join this group" or anything. It was kind of just like, "Oh, welcome," and that was it.
Okay. Ari or Gibson, do you all want to speak to that at all? What about our adults? Any thoughts about what Pastor Robertson has said? Any input? Any insights? Any learnings from you all?
Brother Dr. Wells,
Sir.
uh, help me understand the question one more time, just so I could be succinct in my response.
Yeah. So Pastor Robertson talked about. My question to him was: one, is there any value in us being this separate entity called the Black Church, especially, and is there any value, any harm in, from a young person's perspective, being a part of a white church? What's the value? What's the value add in those settings? And he talked about, obviously, if you as a Black person are being required to assimilate into this culture that is, although it may be presented and promoted as multicultural, in reality, oftentimes that assimilation really means assimilating into a more Anglo experience. And so just kind of talked about, I wanted to hear from Samara. Samara shared what she felt like being in a diverse, predominantly white setting, and what the value is to being in a predominantly Black church. And so I'm curious where others are in regards to that. I was asking the young people if they felt that they have been marginalized in school settings, sports settings, etc., how that made them feel, and if they felt in this current climate, if they feel like they are leaning more toward being in a predominantly Black environment. That's what we're talking about.
I definitely appreciate that, brother. I wanted to make sure I could wrap my head all the way around that. That is a complex situation, and it is those complexities that Black folks exist on, in terms of, like, there's multiple ways that folks exist, right? So what I'm speaking about, the personal, spiritual, physical, and the psychological realms, right? And so what young sister Samara indicated, that when she talked about visually, right, she would feel more welcomed, right? And I would imagine the saying, Samara, definitely correct me if I'm wrong, is that there was a level of comfort associated with seeing folk who phenotypically, right, and I use that scientific word, is they're very similar to you. On the other hand, when we think about spiritual maturation, right? So how do you grow as a Christian? I think that's the most important, right? But oftentimes I think that Black folks are forced to choose their faith or the color of their skin, right? And that's a very dangerous choice that either Black folks are explicitly out front or kind of implicitly, kind of behind the scenes, forced to choose, right? And not making the right choice can have consequences on both ends. So I think we need to be cautious in how we kind of talk about that, and we talk about faith, and we talk about, okay, can you be pro-Black and still be a man or a woman of God, or can you be a man or woman of God and be someone who is pro-Black, someone who wants to attend Black Lives Matter rallies? And so sometimes I think that Black folks are essentially forced into a duality. Now, also, in addition to that, to what good pastor said, I believe that when we're not attending to, racism and the systems that are in play with racism, even our Black brothers and sisters, we can seek that validation in a white evangelical space, right? Which I will contend that was never meant to validate how we exist, right? And so, because some of our white evangelical brothers, they may want our tithes, right? They may even want us on the flyer to look diverse, but they definitely don't want us in their pulpit, and they definitely don't want us intermingling beyond a surface level with their family. So I just think it's a very complex situation when we think about what do all these things mean, because I will even go as far as to say is that when Black folks are in white evangelical spaces, they're not immune from the isms, right? From racism, right? From knowing that there's a heavy burden, perceivably, in their respects, being somebody who was Black and or brown skin.
I am I'm struggling. This subject matter, this topic is personal to me as a pastor. And I am personally struggling because as Pastor Robertson has said, I agree and affirm Christ's words that we are to be one as He and the Father are one. But I am really struggling with the possibility, and I almost hate to say that because I'm a man of faith. I know what God can do. I know what has happened in our culture over the past, 2,000 years. And yet today I am less hopeful. I have less hope that in my time on this earth that these issues will be resolved. I actually think we are moving further apart than we are together. That's my feelings. I'm struggling with that. I'm wrestling with that. I'm conflicted about that. But I'm also interested to hear what others are saying. Pete, Greg, you look like you had something you wanted to say. I wanted to swing over to you.
Yeah, appreciate the conversation. This is deep. I feel woefully unqualified at times to talk about some of these topics. I think I have a little more hope, and that's just my perspective, and I have hope in the younger generation. I have hope in what was just said by, I think it was Ariana, who talked about how over some time and in different spaces, she felt a little more comfortable. But what's happening today, my hope is that what's happening today continues, and what's happening today in the framework of the talk around racism and these kinds of issues. And I hope that the next generation continues this challenge. Because I said to my mom last night, Pastor Wells, the same thing you just said. In my lifetime, I don't expect things to change substantially in my lifetime, and that's a sad statement. But my hope is that the conversation continues. I grew up going to an Episcopalian church in Pasadena, California, All Saints Church. And I've always had a good feeling about the church. The Episcopalian church, at least there's two sides of it. There's one that's way more left leaning, and some of you may know that the strife that the Episcopalian church has had over years over issues such as, should we have female ministers and should we have LGBTQ membership and that kind of thing. There's been a real strong discussion over that. And I've always felt, at least the churches I've attended, that we've been very accepting. Now, that's the perspective of a white man growing up in a white community, predominantly white. But man, the what I've learned in this conversation, the Anglicization of Christ by our forefathers. My parents immigrated from South Africa, so they're not really my forefathers, not to divorce myself from that history, but he was a person of color, right? And what the church has done is it's created this hypocrisy, in my opinion, the white evangelical church, and it's a really difficult thing for me, because I live by the mantra, that Jesus espoused, love and tolerance, right? And that doesn't, and love thy neighbor. That's whoever's in front of me. That's not me selecting who I get to love. That's just who it is, And that's a challenge I have with what I see with the white evangelical construct. And as Dr. Henderson just pointed out, the hypocrisy of the inherent racism that exudes. I mean, they'll probably say, and they'll welcome Black and African American membership and parishioners, but the things they support in today's world just don't square with my reality of what I believe Christ was talking about, what the pure essence of, in my view, most religions is, which is love and tolerance and service to others. So my hope is that people, the young people, and that's why I think this is such a good forum for young people, and I hope we get more to join or watch, is that they continue this, because this is a long-term deal. I mean, we've been at it for 400 years, and it's still, I mean, I don't even know what to say beyond that, other than I have some hope in the young generation that matters of equality and racial equality and social equality and just all the things that I believe are important for this country, and that they continue to well up to the top to where they cannot be ignored. They cannot be ignored. They have to be addressed. And like you said, Pastor, I don't expect it to happen in my lifetime, but my hope is in the young people that they'll continue it.
I agree with you 100%, Greg. I do think, and that's why I'm so grateful to have Ayanna and Jeremiah and Samara and Ari on this call week after week. And you guys are the soldier. You guys are the foot soldiers. And first of all, the fact that you all can be in this conversation and even try to dissect what some of these adults are saying, as we've got professionals, and you guys are staying put, and we're trying to make sure that you guys connect with what we're saying. But we appreciate you because you guys are here. Pastor Isaiah, would you talk a little bit about what you see as far as the future is concerned? And you've already kind of confirmed the belief that if you are attending a church, white, Black, or otherwise, honestly, I mean, I think it's evidence that there are some Black churches that are not aware of the importance of this dialogue, this conversation, this issue, and want to divest themselves from its involvement in their fellowship, and don't think that it belongs there, right? I have a difference of opinion. Can you talk, Pastor Robertson, a little bit about, Greg and I talked about a whole, Dr. Henderson has shared some very insightful things. Can you talk about what you see as far as the future of the church, and how these young people should navigate this journey,
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So let's be clear. I mean, there is a picture given in the scriptures of perfect racial harmony, the removal of all ethnic partiality. And that's in Revelation 7, where you have all nations, tribes, and tongues, right, gathered around the throne. They're all united. Now, and this is interesting because they still maintain their ethnic distinctions. They still maintain their languages, right? They still maintain their various racial indicators. However, they are united, and there are no barriers between them in the midst of that. That's Revelation 7, and that's a picture of the consummation of all things. In other words, that's a picture of what's commonly referred to theologically as the eschaton, the establishment of the new earth. In other words, it's not going to happen down here on this earth, right? So while we are on this earth, while we are under this great curse, right? While sin is still something that we struggle with individually, corporately, systemically, we will always deal with racism. We will always deal with systems and structures set up to perpetuate oppression and marginalization. Now, things could ebb and flow, get better and worse. However, it will never fully be eradicated until Christ returns, which is why the Black church must exist. As long as racism and ethnic partiality exist, the Black church must exist alongside of it, because Black bodies need a place to go for just for cover and safety and respite, right? So now your question is, do I see things? Your question specifically is, do I see things getting better? And I think I have to agree with you. No, I think what we see in the election of Donald Trump, in the emboldening of white supremacists and disparate white supremacist group, right? We're really seeing the true, right, heart of this country, right? Obama was elected to 2 terms, and I'm thankful for that. But it was almost as if because I mean, let's be clear, he was elected. If all the Black people in the world in America voted for Obama, right? He still couldn't be elected just by that fact, because we're such a minority in this country, right? He had to have, white people support him. And while I'm appreciative of that, ultimately, it wasn't truly who we are as a country. It wasn't truly reflective of who we are as a country. What we see now, past 4 years, is truly reflective of who we are and what we are as a country. And we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do because, as I frequently say, the Christianity that allowed the slave master to whip and beat people of color and enslaved people, the Christianity that allowed the landowner to subjugate his tenants through sharecropping, the Christianity that allowed the segregationists, the segregationists to marginalize and oppress Black people in the South, exists today. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's adapted to fit within 21st century sensibilities, but it is not gone. This same Christianity that allowed oppression to run rampant in the South and also in the North through redlining and through essentially caste system is still alive and well. We see it there in California in at Grace with John MacArthur. We see it in other places all around this country.
But when you say, if I can call you, boss, what we saw and what the Christianity that we saw that supported slavery was an amalgamation. I mean, I agree with you, but those preachers, pastors, theologians, etc., took, I lost it, took the word of God and contaminated it, changed it, twisted, eradicated, redacted those truths. You know, for example, we have the slave Bible, and I think it's really important that Samara, Ari, and the Gibsons understand that, you know, the truth of Christianity was not presented in the way that it should have been. It was an amalgamation of Christianity that supported and promoted slavery. Am I right?
Absolutely, yeah. So I want to distinguish, as Frederick Douglass did. So I want to encourage everybody listening, especially the young people, to read Frederick Douglass's autobiography, particularly the appendix, because in the appendix, Frederick Douglass distinguishes between what he calls the Christianity of Christ and the Christianity of this land, right? And he talks about how to conflate the two is the strongest libel and mischaracterization, because he says the pure Christianity of Christ, right, cannot be misconstrued to be the wicked, man-stealing Christianity of this nation. So I don't want anybody to confuse Christianity proper from American quote-unquote Christianity, or from the slave master's Christianity, right? So this is an aberrant, defective form of Christianity, which has to manipulate, has to twist, and ignore
For their own benefit.
What's that? Can you hear me?
For their own benefit.
What'd you say? What'd you say, Pastor? I'm sorry.
For their own benefit.
Exactly. Not just for their own benefit, but for systems and structures of oppression to be perpetuated, right? Because I mean, the reality is that the same Bible that the slave owner read, Nat Turner was conversant with. And when you read the Confessions of Nat Turner, it is clear that he was very familiar with broad swaths of Scripture, and it was his understanding of Scripture that led him to rebel, and that led him to launch the only really large-scale slave rebellion ever to occur. I mean, there were other slave rebellions, be it the Stono, Prosser slave rebellions, but this actually happened. It wasn't discovered and squashed before it could actually happen. Nat Turner did this because of what he saw in Scripture. The abolitionist movement, William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, and others, they were motivated by the Scriptures, by a thorough reading of the Scriptures. So yeah, I don't want to convey this idea that I am at all equating the slave owner's Christianity to Christianity proper, because they're two different things. And let me point this out. I know I could be long-winded at times, but it's important. The Black church recognized this from the beginning. The Black church saw this fact. They understood that the slave master's Christianity was defective from the very beginning. There is a Negro spiritual where they would sing, heaven, heaven. Everybody who claims that they're going to heaven isn't going. When they sang that spiritual, they were secretly referring to the slave master, right? They oftentimes, some of them, they were forced to attend the slave master's church Sunday morning, and then Sunday night they would steal away under the shadow of night, under the poplars, clandestinely. They would worship, and they would often use Exodus narratives, freedom passages, right, as their central passages in their worship service. They saw the duplicity. They saw the inherent evil of the slave master's Christianity, and the black church continues that legacy by and large today.
Yep. If I could interject, and I have to preface this as I always do, is this is coming from my perspective. As a white person, Christianity is not the only religion in this world to have been manipulated and contrived by humanity. I mean, the human condition is one that will manipulate to suit that person's own needs or desires. You only have to look as far as the Muslim faith and and how one side of that doctrine is just the same as I would hope it all to be, speaking to love and truth and service to people. And then you look at another manipulated, contrived, I can only say evil inspired read of that doctrine. And so the same thing has happened with Christianity. But just as there's a concept of a new earth, there's also the concept of heaven on earth. And so where does this all leave us? I mean, again, while it is true, and I voted for Obama twice, and in many ways, I feel like his success or his election to president in part inspired this underbelly of America that's always persisted to rise up and say, we're going to be louder this time.
Yep.
And the hope I have is that a majority of Americans still voted against Trump. If you count the number of votes, it may not have been much, but the hope I have is that if all we did was one person, one vote, we wouldn't have had him as president. So that's the hope I have. That doesn't say I dismiss the fact that this ugliness that this ugliness of racism is not there, and it didn't rear its head, and it's still today, and it's been emboldened in a way like I've never seen. That doesn't mean that I have to hold on to some hope that there's a better day. And I agree, it ain't gonna happen in my lifetime, if ever. And that's because our humanness is fallible, all of us. Whether we have the best intentions or the worst, I believe that human interpretation can lead us astray more often than it does the other direction. And so I guess I would ask, where does this all leave us? Where does this all leave us? And I also agree that the comfort of going to a predominantly Black church, I agree that there's an importance to that, but there's also an importance to being able to go anywhere and feel comfortable, which again, that's the part I don't know will happen in my lifetime, but I'm hopeful that things will change to where that becomes more of the norm than what we're seeing today. Maybe I'm my Pollyannish side, and I have the benefit of coming from a perspective where I haven't had to walk through discrimination and hate and bigotry. But that's just sort of the way I see it. I mean, like I said, humanness can create a whole mess of trouble when you try to add that to a religious or spiritual doctrine. That's just the way I see it. And I don't even know if I'm making any sense. I guess I'm left with what now? What can we do? What can we say? Where do we go? How do we behave to change something?
Yeah, no, you made good sense, Greg. And I can't say enough how much I appreciate your voice. And even as you process what you're hearing, I appreciate you sharing, the struggle that you're going through. Let me open this up. Thank you, Pastor Isaiah. Go ahead. You have something?
No, I don't have anything to say.
Okay.
No.
So let me open this up. Young people, you've heard us. We're talking about the church. We're talking about race. We're talking about hope. I'm curious I know that Ari and the Gibsons and Samar, you guys all have friends who are of other ethnicities. I'm curious about where you stand as it relates to hope pertaining to how we get through this, as it relates to the church and any other area that you find yourself in. What's your level of hope? And I don't mean to, as an adult and as a community and religious leader, to kind of poo-poo on the idea of, change. But I'm interested to hear Ayana, Jeremiah, Ari, Samara. I'm interested to hear where you all stand as relates to, our future as relates to this issue.
One thing I definitely could say I hope will change in the future is the way how we all kind of, no matter how many times you say, oh, this church is diverse and this shares like different cultures, there is still that sense of like there's a way how Black people worship and how they have church, and how white people worship and how they have church, and how Hispanics worship and church and have church. It's just so, it's all so different. So I feel like someday I hope we can all come together and kind of just share our different cultures when it comes to church. And I do think it's very important for all races to still kind of have like church as a place where, you know, it's a sacred place for their race, for them to express their true selves. But then someday I just do hope like we can normalize sharing our cultures and how we worship and how we learn God's word, and how to understand like at the end of the day we're all still worshiping God, our creator, our father, and hopefully there will be enough change in the future where that can happen.
I appreciate that, that sentiment, that hope for the future. Thank you, Samara. Ari or Ayana, either of you all have anything you want to add to that or answer that question? No pressure. About any of the other adults? You guys are, what are your, any other questions you'd like to maybe ask Pastor Robertson? This is an opportunity. It's open.
Pastor, I got a question for you. I guess I would like to hear your thoughts on some of the, I guess, pastors and or Black leaders that are more assertive with the unification with our white brothers and sisters, maybe prematurely without addressing or atoning the sins and continued sins of slavery of their ancestors.
Yeah, so great question. So I am an advocate and a proponent for racial conciliation. I believe that it should happen. I believe that it must happen. However, I believe that it's got to be done thoughtfully, and I believe that it's got to be done honestly. So if there's any Black pastor or pastor that is a person of color that is pushing to unify, I think that's the word that you use, with white churches, my first question is, upon what basis? And hold on, I'm actually home now, so if you hear some in the background, that's my daughter's TV, but I'm about to go downstairs to the basement. So upon what basis? If the push to unify is around truth, honesty, not superficiality, then I'm all for it. If those they are seeking to unify with are willing to listen, also they understand the power dynamic, and they are willing to relinquish some of that power in this endeavor to unify, then great. But if it's just an exercise in sentimentalism, then I think that ultimately, no progress has been made. Case in point, there's a book, Dr. Michael Emerson is the author of the book. It's called Divided by Faith. He talks about the Promise Keepers movement. The Promise Keepers was a big movement. It was a movement of men who came together, and they had a big push for racial reconciliation, right? So they would have periods in the Crusades. And I mean, these crusades packed stadiums all around the country. They would have designated times in the crusade where Black men and white men, brown men, they would all get together and they would confess their sins one to another. They would repent. They would cry. They would hug. And it was deemed as racial reconciliation, right? Now, while that seems wonderful on the surface, the question is, okay, after the tears are shed, after the hugs are given, after all of that, what are we doing to address the systemic problems in communities that keep marginalized people, that keep oppressed people oppressed and marginalized? We've cried, we've hugged, so what? All of that lends to religiosity and good feelings and a strong sense of piety, but what have we really done but cry and hug? And so my question is, upon what basis are we uniting? Are we uniting to assuage, unite guilt? Are we uniting out of is it an exercise in sentimentality? Are we uniting around an agenda, a strategy? Is power going to be shifted? Is privilege going to be identified? Are we really going to go after some of these systemic issues? Are we going to join together and fight for ultimately the empowerment of those on the margins? Right? If that is not what we're unifying around, then I cannot support any pastor, right, who is endeavoring to do that. So, I could go on, but I'll stop right there.
Did that answer your question, Dr. Hill?
100%. I always like to pick the brains of other folk, relating to that, because similar to, what everyone else has shared, I'm not sure if racial conciliation is possible, because obviously racism is stronger than folks' faith. But that's another conversation for another day there.
Actually, I think that's a conversation for today, because I think that's a accurate depiction of Christianity in the 21st century. And
I'm sorry, Pastor Wells.
Yeah, I'm sad to say that. I am a man of faith. I am Christian, and before what I've seen in the past 5-6 months, before that, I would not have said that, but I am really concerned about, one, the way Christianity is viewed today, and the way Christianity is practiced today. And Isaiah was talking, we were together last week. I think it was last week, maybe it was earlier this week. And I said something that I've never said before. And I'm sure this is going to raise some, raise a hair on someone's head. I don't believe, as Greg has also said, that in our generation, we're going to see a widespread unifying, equalization of races. I do believe that Samara, Ayana, Jeremiah, Ariana will be change agents to bring that about. But I think what's interesting is that it took the lesbian, gay, transgender, queer movement to even open the dialogue around, for this age, around civil rights and equality. And our young people who are much more accepting of those gender issues, those identity struggles, much more accepting of those people, and I hate to use that phraseology because it just doesn't sound good, but are much more accepting of that group, allowing the conversation around African Americans and our Black history to even be a part of today's conversation. And I think as the moral, quote unquote, moral right, conservative right, as they, this is hard, as they lose ground, equal rights amongst blacks and other ethnicities, to include gays and lesbians, will be more broadly accepted. I actually believe the conservative right is the biggest hindrance to racial equality in our country. And that's incredibly hard to say.
And I don't disagree with that. I think my background in my world, you guys are people, not to say that I'm not a person of faith, I believe that I am, but my world is largely lived, my professional world, in the world of politics, right? And so that's the place where I think these things are perpetuated. I wanted to add that, the Electoral College is another inherently racist system of government.
Absolutely.
that has
Absolutely.
that has created
Yes.
the world we live in. And so what I'm constantly looking for is, okay, yeah, people of faith are huge in this conversation. And to Pastor Wells' point, the evangelical white, for lack of a better way to put it, has sided with the GOP, and they're holding on to something for dear life, right? And that's what's carried the day every step of the way in this country. And that's what carried the day in 2016 when they vilified one of the most qualified people for the office of president in the history of our country, simply because she was a woman and people didn't like her, but the GOP had the might to do that. And they did it on the backs of evangelical white America. They did it on the backs of white supremacy. They did it on the backs of anything they can engender to fight that fight. And so I'm looking for ways to, systemically, how do we change that? I was listening to a talk show yesterday, and some woman said that to call what's happening, with Jacob Blake and, systemic racism, that's cowardice. I'm thinking, how is that cowardice? What's cowardice is to hide behind the myth, the fallacy that isn't part of systemic racism. But until we move into how do we, as a country, change the political, the governmental, the construct of what perpetuates all this stuff, we're going to be challenged. And my hope is that this fall that'll happen. But man, when I see what's going on, and I'm not confident. That's what I'm not at all confident. But it's going to take a sea change of people getting the hell out of government, and we're being replaced with people who have a better idea of what this country should be to change that. That's what I see hope in the young generation, because I'm starting to see, to Pastor Wells' point, an acceptance, a broad acceptance of people. Who cares who you love? Who cares what you look like? Let's have a better country. Now, I just wish all those people would vote. But, that's just, there I go again. I'm taking up Pete's time.
No. Yeah, you're picking up where Pete left off. No. We appreciate your voice. Anyone else? Young people, you're welcome to speak if you like. Pastor Robertson, you have any parting words you would like to share with us?
Well, I think, yeah, sure. So, question was raised by my brother that just spoke. I'm sorry,
Greg.
Can't remember. What, Greg?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what do we do now? That was the question that was posed, and I want to commend the young people, because this is what we do now, right? We roll up our sleeves and we get into what John Lewis called good trouble, right? Regardless of if we're optimistic or pessimistic, right? The question is, will we, through our pessimism, through our optimism, will we still resolve to love our neighbor as ourselves? And Jesus was clear about what that looks like in the story of the Samaritan. We call him the Good Samaritan, but it's the Samaritan, right? And so we engage. we stay engaged, we commit ourselves, our resources to fight those who would maintain the status quo, those who would perpetuate these systems and structures. We get involved and engaged civically and politically. This idea, this notion that the gospel is solely this otherworldly message that doesn't have any this worldly ramifications is a heresy. That is the furthest thing from the truth and from what Jesus reflected and represented. So if we're Christians, what do we do now? We resolve to live out the implications of the gospel. And we see that articulated in the story of the Good Samaritan. We see that articulated in Matthew 25. We see that articulated in Luke chapter 4. We see a Savior with an inbreaking kingdom. And this kingdom is not solely otherworldly, but it touches this earth as well, which is why we pray on earth as it is in heaven. So, this is what we do. Whether we're pessimistic or optimistic, we provoke change by the power of the Spirit and by the grace of God. So, yeah.
I tell you, thank you, Isaiah, for your input. Thank you for your presence. Please send me your Cash App, PayPal information. I want to send you a gift. This conversation, today's conversations in the future, it's really about awareness. It really is about learning. Again, Jeremiah says that my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And so we have an obligation to be informed and be part of the conversation and be part of the solution.
Today's lesson is going to be on metacognition.
We have that obligation. And Greg and Bo and Ron and Raymar and Isaiah, you guys are important. You're important voices. And especially as we spend time with these young people. And I see Brandon Scott, who's also one of my young people, Cameron Lake. And so Brandon, I'm going to encourage you to watch the recording that I'll post on my page here shortly. We do not know how our voices are impacting and will impact the Gibsons, Ari, Samara, and Brandon, who's just joining us. These are our leaders. You said it, Greg. These are our congressmen and women. These are our governors. These are our lawyers, our doctors. Every one of these young people are going to make an impact. And I would hope that they will be able to look back, no matter how long this Let Them Speak Zoom conversation goes on, if this is the last week or if next month is the last, I would hope that they would be able to point back and say, I spent 4 months being influenced by influencers, that on whose shoulders that they stand on. Just like we stand on the shoulders of Dr. King and Malcolm X and Frederick Douglass and W.E.B. Du Bois and many of our heroes who have gone before us. You young people, you stand on the shoulders of Emmett Till, excuse me. You stand on the shoulders of the 4 black young people, children who were bombed in the church bombing in Birmingham. You stand on those shoulders as well as ours as you go forward to just kill it on the high school campus and the middle school campus. Shoot to be the valedictorian. Shoot to be at the top of your class. Shoot to get into the best schools, whether that be at HBCU or otherwise. But shoot to be your absolute best and love the Lord. And love the Lord and serve the Lord and be be his examples and be his witness and be his voice in the world. You are beautiful, Black young people. You're amazing, you're intelligent, you're important, and you're valued to us and to this country. That's all I have, folks. Thank you for being with us today. I will post this on YouTube and on our Aspire to Aspire page. And Pastor Robertson, thank you for being with us. Love you, and we appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.